Thank you, yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining to this talk. Um, okay, let's begin our talk regarding Django REST Framework and how to make it and you go to the next level. So first of all, who are used Django REST Framework or no Django REST Framework? So great. I don't need to make a review. So who am I? I'm Carlos Martinez. I'm from Colombia. I'm backend developer at URIT. You can follow me on Twitter, on GitHub, and also I have on a small blog. In this is Colombia. There's the place that I came from. I'm running the Python Bogota group. We have a meetup for about 2,500 members right now. I also do photography time to time. I have a daughter, and I do travel photography. So let's begin. We're going to start with a 5-minute API. And we're going to do something like have users, create events, have promoters for events, and to create tickets. So while we are doing this one, we're starting to think about these 5 topics. How to display different data based on context. For instance, I don't want to get the same fields for an event inside a ticket, for instance. How to get better performance. How to filter information inside the API, configure permissions, and how to render results in different formats. Let me get out of here, and let's take a look how our first version of the API is going to look like. So this is our tickets endpoint. As you can see, I'm sending out a nested object for event and also for user on each ticket that I get. User has only fields, doesn't have any nested object in particular, and for promoter, for event, sorry, I got the same, but only promoter is the nested object. So that's it, that's everything, the API is working, but no. The problem is here, that we have here is if I got only 10 items, I guess I have right now. Yeah, it's not quite much. It works fine. I get responses in about, let's take a look how much time it's taking. It's about 100 milliseconds. But let's start to create a few more tickets. Always happens, this kind of things. Tickets. Come on. Give me 1 second, please. Maybe I'm in the wrong branch. Yep, that was the reason. Okay. Sometimes happens. Okay, right now I'm creating 5,000 new tickets for this API, including promoters and users. So it is going to create a few more. What we're going to see in our API is that all these response times is going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger every time. So our API is not done. So first of all, something that we can start to thinking about is when we have nested objects, we can reuse our serializers. So instead of have different serializers for what is a representation of an event and inside of ticket and create a new serializer class, we can start to use something called dynamic serializers. So we can reuse our logic in one serializer and use it for different purposes and different sections of the API. So this is a dynamic serializer class that you can use. Is based on model serializer from Django REST Framework. But the difference is that it has different attribute to get fields. And that's what does really the trick. Then you can create, for instance, in this case, an event serializer with a space to get the representation that you expect to get for this particular nested object. So you can define static methods to get those fields in this particular serializer. So if everything works fine, it continues creating more things. Let me continue there. Maybe I just create too much. So that's the main thing that you can do with dynamic serializer. So you can, for instance, create a static method to get location fields, but you can get only another one method to return ID and name, for instance, if you needed to. So that's the way you can create those particular methods. That way you can save time, reuse logic within the serializer that you already create, and there's no code duplication. So what about getting better performance? As you can imagine, we started pretty good, we started pretty fast, there's no issues, but the things started to get worse and worse when we get more users involved in our application. So let's see if that already finishes. Come on, well, I'm going to stop this. And let's take a look to how it is working now. I'm in the right one branch, so let me switch back to the worst scenario right now. Previously, I just read about 15,000 elements. It's trying to render that information, and you can see here how Django is making too many queries to the API, to the database to get all the information that I am asking in this particular endpoint. So until Django doesn't get all that information, is not going to respond. So that's the reason we should start to use Prefetch. And Prefetch, what really does, it will create for us a different query to a database to try to get all data that we need to make a representation for a serializer really easy and in just one query, if that's the case. For instance, let's take a look to what happens when you get ticket objects .all. It just only is going to create a select with all the fields from the table that you need. But when you add select related, what it's going to do is going to get all the fields related to that model in particular that you have relation in that model in particular. So here is the same query, but now gets not only the information about ticket, but also the information about user. So it's not going to go again to the database and make 100,000 of queries, but instead it's going to be just one. So that small change is going to save you a lot of time. It's going to save you a lot of headaches. So that's the important thing that you need to take a look, how to get everything in just one query. Prefetch related is going to be other one which is useful, but keep in mind that it's great for many-to-many relationships. And the previous one, as we can see, we get where user ID equals to users.id. So that way is making the relationship between them. On prefetch related, it's going to be a little bit different, but even though it's going to be better than not making any prefetch related. So in this case in particular, it's going to do two queries. The first one to get the information about a ticket, and the second one is going to get the information about the events. But it's going to select only the IDs that they need to get the information that they expect. So for instance, if you make a filter for tickets and you are getting just a set of tickets, that is going to create a different set of IDs that is going to query for the table event. So it's going to be way smaller. Also, something that you can do and you can improve is to use the Prefetch object. What really help you out is to get the information that you really need for that particular representation on the API. So if you see here inside the Prefetch related, instead of having the string of the related field, I'm getting a Prefetch object inside that set the string of the attribute or the external or the foreign key, and I can create a new query set and select the things that I really need. So with that dot only, I am only asking for, in this case, ID and name. So the query is going to be a little bit more smaller. And when you have a lot of data to get in, it's going to make the change. So let's take a look if that's already finishes. Yep, it takes 2 minutes and 5 seconds to complete it. So our user is gone from the application. It's not going to continue with us. So prefetch and related and select related is a must to when our applications are growing. Next that we can do is to start to making filter, how to get our information in a better way. One package that is really useful to get this is to use Django URL filter. You can set up 2 ways. The easy way is this one. You only add Django filter backend for URL filter integrations DRF, and you can select the filters that you expect to get filters on. And with this in particular, you will be able to do something like this. So you can go for the endpoint events, and you can filter to get a set of IDs if you need to, or you can get the name and make sure it contains any particular string that you expect to get, or if a related object has some particular name in this case, and you can start to filter even more complicated things. So it's going to help you out to get complex queries inside the URL. But you can also make it with a class and use a model filter set that you can reuse on different endpoints. It's the same thing, the same logic. It's pretty similar to make a serializer, a model serializer. All right. So, but we already make prefetch. We already make a few things regarding filtering. What about cache? We can start to use the Django powerful cache that we have out of the box. So to do it, you need to activate those middlewares with the red arrow and make sure that the common middleware is in the middle, somewhere in the middle. And to make it work using Django REST Framework, you need to call these two decorators. Variant cookie with the method decorator variant cookie, and the decorator to get a cache page, and you can set up the time that you want. And if you need to, and I recommend it to make it, select and create a K prefix. So that way you won't forget how to invalidate your cache at this point. So if you set up this and it's working, it's going to give you a better performance, please do not forget to invalidate cache in some way. So drop these lines of code somewhere in your code to make sure that when something changes, the cache is invalidated at the right time and not after the time expired. But there's something else that we can do to improve our performance using cache. One is a really good package called Django Cache Ops. And what is going to help you out is to cache all ORM transactions that you are doing, and you can cache multiple query sets. So to use cache ops, you need to start to work using Redis. So to use it, you add to install apps, as many packages already, set up your Redis cache, and you can use these configurations to set up a few things regarding what you expect to cache ops to start to make cache for you. And you can set up your own models and your applications to be cache. So you can define what operation is going to be cache by default, what is going to be the timeout by default on different applications and different models if you need to. And you can define to create a cache for everything, but it's not quite recommended because you may end up having cache on different things that you really don't want to. So if you need to, you can also make cache. You can use cache ops to make it by yourself. So as you can see, we have this get query set from model view set, and you can define your query as expected. But at the end, you append dot cache and open and close in parentheses. With that, is going to be cache in Redis, and you will get the results not from your database, but instead from Redis. So it's going to help you out with performance. But what about permissions? What we can do to improve our permissions? Actually, Django already has a very great permission system, but we can try to use something called dry permissions, and it's going to improve our experience. So as any other package, we install with pip dry rest permissions added to our installed apps. And what we are going to do is in our view sets, we're going to add permission classes, this line over here, and you can define if that's a public endpoint or is required authentication, but also add dry permissions. And now you can start to doing something like this. So in your models, you can define a set of global permissions. In this case, these examples are it has permission to read, has permission to write, or has permission to create. So you get access to the request. At this point, you can get the user, and you can make some validations. You can require a permission, require an attribute inside the user, or anything from the request. So you can define different sets of rules for each one. And you can also have object permissions. So it's not only global, but also you can have access to the instance itself and make some validations. The first example is going to make like the user is related to that particular object. And also you can require, as I mentioned before, require a particular permission already granted for that user that is requesting access. But even though you can add also permission not to only the object, but also to a field or an action. So if you have a field and you want to protect to get rights to a particular field, you can set up this method and you can protect this particular change. And if you define in a view set a different action, you can use it with a name, and you can make a restriction over there. And so all the logic regarding permission is going to be only on each model. So it's easier to find where the actual logic is there. But you can customize a little bit more. Maybe you want to share a set of permissions within different models. One way to do it is to create a custom permission. So this is based on REST Framework permission itself, and you can use it for different. You only need to implement the method has permission and has some utilities. For instance, safe methods are going to be get, meta, and options. So if you are given, in this case, access to make requests to that methods, but is not one of these methods is going to require a permission before you can grant it access for patch, put, post. So that can help you out to add this permission to a different view sets, and then you can protect in a different way that particular view set that you add that permission. But how to use then dry permissions when you are outside of a model view set? If you create an API view, you're going to see that it will throw you an error because there is not a key request. So important in those cases, you will need to create your serializer with context. It's going to require to provide a request. Otherwise, it's going to throw you an error because the model has not a way to get the request and make and run all your logic that you are defining there. And last one that I want to bring to you guys to take your API to another level is to use some renderers. So yesterday we saw this package working when using Automagic. So this is going to be another example. It's very, very useful to and very easy to implement. So on your model view set, you only need to add this particular class, XLS file mixin, and inside renderer classes, you need to add XLL renderer. So with that in mind, you can create Excel files just calling the API by adding a new header or making explicitly on the URL. Don't forget if you want to continue having the API HTML view from Django REST Framework, don't forget to add browsable API renderer. Otherwise, it's going to be just JSON or Excel. All this code is going to be available on this repo. I'll give you a couple seconds. You can take a picture, and let's take a look to how it works after we do all that things to this API. So let's take a look. So I'm going to change the branch to master right now. And our previous response took 2 minutes and a little more. And now it's only 124 milliseconds. Of course, it's paginated, but that's the idea to get quick responses. And we are getting the event and the user here, And you can see here, remember last time I tried to do this. These are the logs to all the queries that the Django was doing to get that representation. And now, this is it. This is what it's really doing right now to get all that information. So it's a really small query. Our DevOps team is going to love us to do the kind of thing, that kind of stuff. But of course, you can get even a little bit more. It's going to take extra time to render. It depends on how many data you want to get. In this case, I'm getting almost all that dataset. No, 10,000 items, but it's getting 7 megabytes of data at this point, and it took about 3 minutes. So maybe that's not what you're expecting to get. That's not exactly maybe what you need, but you can define the limits using the Django REST Framework pagination. So, well, that's it for now. I want to thank you to my team at URIT and also for the client that I work with, building engines. That's where all the magic happens, and I learned all these things. So thank you.